Hello YouTube, my name is Dracut and welcome to another video. In this video, I am going to be covering my deck profile of Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX is a strong deck that mainly prioritizes in setting up your Gardevoirs and discarding energies with Kirlia and drawing lots of cards. So, without further ado, let's get into the deck profile. So, first of all, we are going to need energy. In this deck, we have 7 energy, 7 psychic energy. These energies are going to be discarded and used by Gardevoir to fuel our main attackers like Drifloon and Screamtail, which I will be covering later. We also have 2 dark energies. These 2 dark energies will be used in fueling and making Monkey Dory usable, which we will also be covering later. Now, first, we are going to be covering the pillars of the Gardevoir deck. First, these 4 routes. You can't really evolve into Gardevoir without the basic counterpart, routes. There's nothing much to say about routes, but it is the thing that it is the Pokemon that you are going to be placing down onto your bench in early game, then evolving into Kirlia and Gardevoir in the mid to late game. Next, we have for Kirlia to match the 4 routes. Kirlia is a very powerful card, allowing you to discard a card from your hand to draw 2 other cards. Now, this synergy works well with Gardevoir, since it needs energy to attach to Pokemon to damage them. And finally, we have the star of the deck, Gardevoir. What Gardevoir does is it takes energy from the discard pile, attaches it into a psychic type Pokemon, and applies 20 damage counters to it as a fee. Now, these 20 damage counters might seem like a bad omen, but those 20 damage counters are going to be useful to fuel our main attackers, which is Drifloon and Screamtail. Now, what do these cards do? In summary, these cards deal more damage if there are more damage counters on them. For example, Drifloon here deals 30 times more damage for each damage counter on the Pokemon. So, if there are 10 damage counters on this Pokemon, it can deal a total of 300 damage. And for Screamtail, 200. But why Screamtail is better or more utilizable is that it deals damage to Pokemon anywhere on the board, as long as they don't have a mana fee. Now, why is mana fee in this deck? What it does is it prevents all damage done to your bench Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. The best example of this is countering Screamtail if your opponent has a mana fee. But this deck has mana fee to counter other threats like Regidrago, V-Star, and of course mirror matches with Screamtail. There are also some niche picks and decks that this card can counter. Now, to reach the damage threshold on the opponents for easy one-hit KO, you need Monkey Dory. What Monkey Dory does is it transfers 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon into one of your opponent's Pokemon. This works well against Terra EX Pokemon which have more than 300 HP. Best examples of this is Charizard with 330 HP, and another example is Gardevoir itself with 310 HP. Now, Because this is a setup deck, you need a good staller, and the staller I use is Mimikyu. Mimikyu prevents damage to your Pokemon by EX and V, but be careful, for this effect only works for this Pokemon. So, let's say an EX Pokemon tries to attack Mimikyu, that won't deal damage. This is a great way to stall and block your opponent's damage while setting up cards on your bench. Now, we also have a Flutter Mane. Flutter Mane blocks abilities to your active Pokemon. It's a simple ability, but it's really strong, for it can work against decks like Iron Thorns and Lost Zone. Finally, for our Pokemon, we have Radiant Greninja, our Radiant in this deck. Radiant Greninja makes you discard an energy card to draw 2 cards. This is an efficient way to discard energy and get more sweet cards in return. Now, the main strategy of Gardevoir EX is discarding cards and powering up your Psychic Embrace to attach energy into your main attackers. Once energy is attached to your main attackers, they will get damage counters. Those damage counters help fuel their attacks, and because the more damage counters they have, the more damage they deal. This could often result in one-hit knockouts, even to strong 2-prize card Pokemon like Charizard, Dragapult, and others. Now, we need supporters to help this deck. So, we have Ivan. What Ivan does is it searches an item card and a Pokemon tool card from your deck and puts it into your hand. Because of the amount of item cards and tool cards we have in this deck, and how necessary they are to fulfilling our goal, these are very important cards that we need to utilize as much as possible to create a valid and good economic setup board. Now, what if your hand isn't that good, or your opponent has a better hand than you? We have Iono. Iono makes you shuffle your hand into the bottom of your deck and makes you draw the amount of prize cards that you have. So for example, you have 6 prize cards, you draw 6 cards. And the opponent does this too. This can disrupt your opponent and help you. Next, we have Professor Turo's Scenario. Professor Turo's Scenario puts one of your Pokemon in play into your hand. It's a great way to heal Pokemon, and it's a great way to block Pokemon from taking 2 prizes like Gardevoir EX. Then we have 1 Boss's Orders. What Boss's Orders does is it switches a bench Pokemon to their active spot. That's for your opponent, that is. It's a great way to pick off small 2 prizes like Luminion and Rotom. A problem people commonly have in the early game is getting your routes set up on board, and that's where Buddy Buddy Puffin comes in. Buddy Buddy Puffin makes you search up to 2 Pokemon that has 70 or less HP and are basic. This, in partnership with routes, makes you set up a very good early stage. And the more routes you have, the more Curlia you can evolve, and the more Curlia you have, the more draw engines you have. The more energy you discard, the more chances you can get Gardevoir and an easy knockout. Now, we have 3 Ultra Balls. Because Buddy Buddy Puffin can only gain basic Pokemon, and Pokemon with under 70 HP, Ultra Ball can help getting with the bigger Pokemon, like Gardevoir for example, Curlia, and Screamtail. The cost for the Ultra Ball is discarding 2 cards, which in tandem with discarding energies can be very beneficial at times. But be careful, for if you discard actual cards that you can be used, you might get in trouble by getting stuck in a sticky situation. So use this sparingly and use them wisely, for they are very strong. For those Pokemon that are basic and don't really seem to be worth the Ultra Ball, you can use the Nest Ball. The Nest Ball can gain such pillars in the deck, like, for example, Fluttermane, Mimikyu, and most importantly, Monkidori. Now, the Nest Balls are very important. So, once you get one, use it wisely on what basic Pokemon you are going to use it into, and adapt to the situation you're in. For example, you see a frail benched Pokemon, you could get a Nest Ball for a Screamtail, and so on. Next up, we have Earthen Vessel. Earthen Vessel helps you get more energy, and those energies are ripe for the discarding. You can discard these energies by using Radiant Greninja, Kirlia, Ultra Ball, or any other method that you have up your sleeve. Now, this is a very important card because it helps you gain energy at a quick and rapid pace. The quicker you are with Gardevoir to set up, the better your chances of winning are. And this is a good card for speeding up that lengthy process of setting up. Because it's a lengthy process, your opponent might take more prize cards than you. And the main goal of the game, or mostly, is to get all of your prize cards before your opponent. Now, because you're normally at a disadvantage or have more prize cards than your opponent, Counter Catcher is a great addition to your deck. Because what it does is, if you have more prize cards than your opponent, you can take some cards off their bench and put it into their active. This helps for getting frail Pokemon onto the active, or getting Pokemon with high retreat costs to delay the attacker's reign on your board. Now, because we only have one Drifloon, one Screamtail, and mostly one of every basic Pokemon, we have the Night Stretcher. What the Night Stretcher does is it takes a Pokemon from your discard pile or an energy if you see fit, and put it into your hand directly. This is a great way to get easy access to your discard pile and the Pokemon there. It's very useful for a plethora of situations. If you want to put a lot of cards into your deck and don't really need it into your hand right now, we have the Super Rod. We have one Super Rod in this deck, so use it wisely. It takes three Pokemon or energy that you have in your discard pile and shuffles it into your deck. Very useful. And then we have the Hisuian Heavy Ball. Because like I said, we only have mostly one of each type of attacker in this deck, some of them inevitably will get sent into the prize cards. And if you don't have this card, that's a really big problem. So having the Hisuian Heavy Ball, looking into your prize cards, and getting one basic Pokemon that you can find there, put it into your hand, and shuffling the Heavy Ball into the prize cards, it's a very neat and fancy way to get a Pokemon out of there and into your hand. Now, Lost Vacuum. Normally, some Gardevoir decks don't have Lost Vacuum, but I find comfort in using it. It takes one of your cards into the Lost Zone and removes a Stadium or tool that's on the board. It's especially useful on discarding Jamming Towers or your opponent's tools, like for example Future Booster Energy, or sometimes even Heroescape. It's a very nice card to have. Now, to set up your Kirlias immediately, we have Technical Machine Evolutions. We have two of these. What it does is it's a tool, so you can attach it to any Pokemon that you like. With one energy, you can use Evolution, which makes two of your bench Pokemon evolve. So for example, you have two routes. You can evolve those two routes by using Technical Machine Evolution for such as those Curlias in your deck to evolve them. It's a very nice way on setting up fast, and why Gardevoir, mostly with this card, chooses to go second. Now, to deal high amounts of damage, like I said, for your attackers, you need them to get damaged first. Now, some of them don't have enough HP to withstand their damage costs. This is where Bravery Charm gets very useful. What it does is it makes any Pokemon that you have that's basic gain 50 more health points. This allows for more damage and a higher damage cap for your Pokemon. So Drifloon, which can only go for a measly 180 without a tool, to a very strong 300 damage with this Bravery Charm attached. And 330 if you have already 30 damage on some of your Pokemon, and transfer it with Monkey Dory to eliminate almost any big Terra-type EX V-Star threat that you are going to be combating. Now, Technical Machine Devolution. What it does is it takes two of your opponent's Pokemon and removes one of their evolutions. So for example, removing Curlia from routes. Now this is a very important card for your opponent, because if you use it to them, some cards will get devolved into their basic form. Because most decks here in this format use Rare Candy, skipping the middle stage entirely. So using Technical Machine Devolution will delay their process and waste their Rare Candy materials. But use it wisely, for you must read your opponent's hand before you can use it, so that it won't backfire. Because this is an attack like Technical Machine Evolution. Now, we have our Stadium. Artisan. What this does is once per player's turn, they can search their deck for a basic Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, like Pokemon EX, Pokemon V, and Radiant Pokemon. Now this is a great way on finding your Pokemon that you will use that's basic. For example, Glatamine, Monkey Dory, Screamtail, and so much more. It's a nice addition to the deck and can remove stadiums because of its nature as a stadium itself. One of the biggest threats Gardevoir EX faces right now is the Jamming Tower, which removes the use of tools, for it blocks them. Now, in this deck, you'll have to be having an ace spec. Some Gardevoir decks have Hyper Aroma, but I choose to go with Unfair Stamp. Because your Pokemon would normally get knocked out by your opponent's more faster Blitz Pokemon, this Unfair Stamp delays their hand and maybe even ruins their momentum. It makes them shuffle their hand into the deck, draw 2 cards, and makes you shuffle your hand into the deck and draw 5. It's a really nice addition. It can even shut down some decks at a time if they don't have any draw engines. So, it's a trump card basically, that's why it's an ace spec. Use this in a situation where you think your opponent will be heavily affected by this card. Now, we've covered basically everything in the deck, except for Rare Candy. Rare Candy, like I said, skips the middle stage entirely. Not many Gardevoir has this, but I just really like it because it saves me in some situations. If you really need a Gardevoir that fast, you can use a Rare Candy on a Corlia and evolve it into a Gardevoir. Not many people would put this into their deck, but it's in mine. So, that is our Gardevoir deck profile. Gardevoir is a really nice deck if you like setup, high damage, and draw. Be careful for any shutdowns out there that would try to hinder your progress at a time, like destroying your Kirlias. And the best way to protect those Kirlias and to be successful in your Pokemon match is to know your cards well, know your opponent's deck, and having adaptive thinking. Thank you for watching. My name is Jacob. Goodbye.